Rebbe told me that you boys are learning Parshas Bahar. And that you're going through the halachos, some of the psukim about Shemittah. I don't know exactly how far you get. Did you finish all the psukim already?
The main part, we didn't do the process about what you can eat.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the halachos about Shemittah, make you a little maybe familiar with some of the things that you may or may not have known about. So the first thing is, your Rebbe probably told you this already, that this coming Rosh Hashanah, that's in, 6-8 months from now, 9 months from now, is going to be Shemittah. Okay, that is, it happens every 7 years, but it's going to be this coming Rosh Hashanah. So, you may have looked at Psukim also, that there's a halacha of Yovel. Every 7 Shemitah, there's another one called Yovel. But that halacha of Yovel we don't do nowadays. Okay? Anybody know why? Yes?
We don't know when it is.
We don't know when it is, but we can't figure it out.
No, we don't know when it started, they lost the cycle.
Oh, okay, well, that's an interesting point you should make, because that's how we count the cycle. But actually, we could figure that out. We could figure out when Yovel should be. Yeah, what do you think? Very good. There's a special rules. You can only have Yovel on the very specific situation. It has to be certain types of Yidden, and many Yidden have to be in Eretz Yisrael. We don't have Yovel nowadays. So really the truth is that the din is, if there's no Yovel, then there's also no Shemitah either. According to the Torah, in times when there's no Yovel, like right now, there's also no Shemitah. So nowadays, Shemitah that we have is only Midrabanan. Okay? So I have a question for you about the pasuk your Rebbe just mentioned beforehand. The Torah says that if a person keeps Shemitah, Hashem's going to take care of them. They're going to have enough produce to eat, even though for a whole year they're not working their fields. Okay? Do you think that works even nowadays, when it's a D'Rabbanan? Nowadays we don't keep Shemitah because the Torah says so. Nowadays we keep Shemitah because the Chacham said so. So do you think that nowadays we get that protection? Yeah, what do you think? Okay, good. What do you have to say about it? You want to say the same thing? Yeah, what do you say?
He also says that whatever the Chacham say is as if the Torah said.
Okay, good. And you?
Well, if you could just find out, if you ask the farmer, and you ask them if
you can see if it happens for real.
Right.
So we can figure out the answer to the question. Okay, it happens to be the Machlokes. Whether what Hashem told us, the Machlokes a smart and a Chazon Ish had to understand certain choices, whether nowadays is there still that same, do we get that same promise? Okay, I have one more question about that. Okay, do you know that there's a Shemitah happens only once every 7 years? Okay, so we have a rule that ladies don't have to do a mitzvah saseh shehazman grama. Okay, anybody know what that means? What does that mean? It happens every time. So, well, Shemitah only happens every 7 years. So, do you think that Shemitah, maybe ladies don't have to do Shemitah maybe? Because it's a mitzvah that comes only every 7 years. Well, if it comes only every 7 years, then maybe you don't have to do it, because the mitzvah says shehazman grama. Okay, I'm not going to answer that question. That's quite a complicated question. Okay, so we have the mitzvah of Shemitah. I'm gonna tell you in a minute what that means that we have mitzvah of Shemitah. But there are special the rules of Shemitah have a lot to do with things that grow on the ground. Okay, and I'm going to break it down into 5 rules or 5 sets of halachas that have to do with Shemitah. Okay, can anybody guess before I say my first one? I'm going to have 5 groups of halachas that have to do with Shemitah. Anybody have any ideas? Any of those 5? Yes. Excuse me? Not working the field. Good. Okay. Anything else? Yeah?
Not throwing out food.
Not throwing out food. Kedusha Shvius. We'll talk about that. Okay, that was my third one. Go ahead. Yeah, yours was my first. That was my third. Go ahead. Ooh, Zehuza. That's for Yovel. No, that I wasn't going to talk about that. That's not a Shvi. Shemitah is something, that's very good. I'm not going to talk about it until the very end. But you're right. And that was not one of the things I'm thinking about. You're right. That's true. Shemitah is something at the end of Shemitah. But on Shemitah, I have 5 groups of things. Okay, go ahead. You can't harvest a lot at a time. Okay, that's part of the second one I was going to say. That's a part of it. Yeah, go ahead. Pruning. Well, that's part of you can't work the ground. Okay. You're doing pretty good. Yes, no, one more person.
Could do stuff that you need to do if you don't have your plants to grow, adding to that, or if it's bothering people.
Very good. That's part of the first one. I'm going to mention it also. Very good. Okay, so let me go to the 5 that we have. I'll mention them. You'll hear what a number of you said things about them. I see you guys are really learning this psukim well. The first is, okay, before I told you, okay, I'm going to read from pasuk that you all learned, and that is pasuk Hey. It says, "Ei sviach kitzircha lo siptzar." That's in de nizirecha lo siptzar. Okay, what's the difference between the word? You shouldn't you shouldn't be siptzar one thing, and you shouldn't be siptzar another thing. What is that? What do those words mean? Siptzar and siptzar. Anybody know that in pasuk Hey?
What's the difference between kosher and kosher? What is the item?
Yeah. Grapes, very good. It's two different types of harvest. In Lashon Kodesh, there are different words for different types of harvesting. Excuse me. So Ketira means for cutting grains, and Betira means for cutting grapes. So why did the Torah have to tell us not to cut grains and not to cut grapes? Why didn't it just tell us, don't cut one of them, and we'll figure out that if you can't do one, you can't do the other one. You know, on Shabbos, the Torah tells us, don't do the malachas they did in the Mishkan. And it's not that we're not allowed to do the Mishkan. We're not allowed to do anything like that. In the Mishkan, they cook. So we're allowed to do all types of cooking, not just exactly the one that they did in the Mishkan. Well, we say the same thing here also. That the Torah tells us not to harvest, we'll know not to harvest anything. Yes, go ahead. Okay, well, I'm going to say something a little different. The thing is like this. The answer is that we learn out from this pasuk that only the exact things that it says in the Torah are asur. If it doesn't say you're not doing exactly what it says in the Torah, that's not asur midaraisa. So it turns out that there are 6 things that midaraisa you're not allowed to do on Shemittah. Okay? Any guesses on what those 6 things are? 6 things that the Torah says. Midaraisa, you're allowed to do a lot of other things. 6 things. Yeah, go ahead. Harvesting. Well, harvesting is not a full explanation. You're right. The word harvesting is right, but you're really allowed to harvest the produce on Shemittah. You're allowed to eat it. You're allowed to go and take it. So we can't say you're not allowed to harvest. Can you say that better? What does it mean you're not allowed to harvest? You're allowed to go pick things off the ground. It's mutter to eat it. So what does it mean you're not allowed to harvest? It's true. One of the things is you're not allowed to harvest. Anybody want to say? Well, let's answer that question first. What does it mean you're not allowed to harvest? Yes.
Harvest and put it away for later.
You're not allowed, actually, you're allowed to harvest and put away. We'll see.
As long as the animal is...
Yeah, we're going to talk about that, very good. But you're allowed to harvest it away, but you're not allowed to harvest it as if you're, when you harvest the whole field. If you're the owner, you guys have seen people, they drive around in their tractors, in their combines, and they harvest the whole field at once. You're not allowed to do like that. Okay, so that's the malacha of Ketzira, is to harvest it as if it's all yours and you're taking the whole field. Okay, that's one malacha. There are 6 malachas you're not allowed to do. Anybody want to guess the other ones? Yes.
You're not allowed to do something that to be hefker.
No, we're going to talk about making it hefker. That's true, you have to make it hefker. But I'm talking about 6 malachas in the field. Things in the field you're not allowed to do. Yes. You're not allowed to feed it to animals. We're going to talk about that also. But I'm talking about in the field. Things work in the field, like harvesting things off the ground. You're right about what you said, but that's not for these things. Yes.
Doing more for your plants than needed.
Doing more of your plants than you need it. No, that's for a drop on it. Because with the rice, what are the things you're not allowed to do? Okay, I'll tell you what they are. The first is, you're not allowed to plant vegetables or grains. When the Torah says, Sizra, you shouldn't plant, that means grains or vegetables and things like that. You can't plant trees. Okay? That's called, in Lashon Kodesh, that's called Netiya. That's not called Zriya, means to plant grains and vegetables, but the word Netiya means for planting trees. And really, you're not even allowed to plant trees that have no fruit on them. You're not allowed to plant any trees during Shemittah. That is, how we know that is a good question. Okay, we're not going to talk about that today. That's not in the pasuk. But that's also the right to plant trees. Okay, next. You're not allowed to, I'm surprised someone didn't say this one. You're not allowed to prune a grape tree. Because it says in the pasuk, you're not allowed to prune a grape tree. Only grapes. Everything else is only midrabanan. Midaraisa, you're not allowed to prune a grape. Pruning means when you cut back the parts that are not grown well to help the rest of the tree grow better. Okay, you cut off certain not good parts to get it to grow better. Okay, I missed one over here. Okay, you're not allowed to harvest from a grape tree. Just like you say, you're not allowed to harvest in a regular field, you're not allowed to siptzar. And the last one is halacha b'shmin Sinai, you're not allowed to do charisha, you're not allowed to plow. Plowing is something that you do to your field to help the things grow better, you're not allowed to do charisha. Excuse me, now, those 6 malachos are the ones that are asur mid'oraisa. Okay? But there's everything else, basically, in your field is asur mid'rabbanan. No work in the field, basically, everything else is asur mid'rabbanan. Okay? But there's a big, serious, significant difference between what's asur mid'oraisa and what's asur mid'rabbanan. Someone mentioned it here before already. Anybody know what the difference is? So you said that's asur mid'oraisa on Shemittah in the field, and said it's only asur mid'rabbanan. Any guesses? What do you say? You guys in the back seem to have a lot to say over here. Maybe some voices on the front over here also. Yeah, what do you say? Yeah. Yes, that's true. It's a more serious punishment if you do the derisa. That's true. I had something else in mind. Yes.
If you have to do something and you want to know what, if you want to do it the least possible if they were involved, so say someone's really hurt, and you need to, or I don't know, the person starving, and needs food, then you can do after the
Okay, good. That's true. In the case of an emergency, you would try to minimize the issue you're doing. That's true. That's also not what I had in mind. You guys are very good. What else? Yes.
For reward.
For what?
Like on the 6th year, more on the 8th year, more.
I don't know what you mean by that.
More, you got more, like the reward.
Oh, the reward to keep it. Okay, I guess that's true. That's not what I had in mind. What I had in mind, someone said this before, and I'm surprised nobody remembered what someone said. And that is, if something is asur mid'oraisa on Shemittah, you can't do it. If it's asur mid'rabbanan, the Chachamim said, if you need to do it to keep your plant from dying, then you're allowed to do that. You're only not allowed to do malachas rabbanan when it helps things grow better. But if it's just to prevent it from dying, then you're allowed to do that. And I'll give you an example. Do you ever see air conditioners? Like in your window, they have water dripping out of the back of it?
Yeah.
You ever see that? Okay, well, on Shemittah, if you have an air conditioner and it drips water, you can't let that water drip onto the grass in front of your house. Because if you do that, you're watering the grass. Okay, and if you're watering the grass is an asur mid'rabbanan to water the grass on Shemittah. But if you have an orange tree and that tree is going to die if you don't water it, you're allowed to turn on a sprinkler and water it. Okay, you could water that tree on Shemittah to keep it from dying. So you're not allowed to water things to help them grow better, but if you have to water them to keep them from dying, then you're allowed to do that. Okay, yes?
So if you have one sprinkler in that area, and it's a big sprinkler, then water out.
Okay, that's a very good question. That's way beyond this. That's a very good question. So the Chacham, the Rabbanim will tell people exactly what they should do. Okay, how they should water it to only water the right thing and not the wrong thing. You're right. Can't water too much. Yes.
Usually there's like grass.
Growing around the tree?
Yeah.
Right, so that's part of what he said. And the Rabbanim in their soul will tell people what to do to make sure they do the right amount and not too much. I'm just giving you as an example that sometimes you're allowed to water things and sometimes you're not allowed to water things, depending on why you're doing it. Okay. The second din for Shemittah is, the first one is you're not allowed to work on the ground. The second one, as someone had mentioned, is your land has to be made hefker. You have to let your field, anybody can walk in, the land is not hefker, but all the fruit that goes there is hefker. So if you have an orange tree growing, and somebody wants to come in and take that fruit, anybody can walk in and take it. Nobody can stop the person from taking your stuff that's hefker. Okay? So these first 2 halachas are the 2 more famous halachas. One is you can't work the ground, and the other one is that you have to make it hefker. It happens to be, if you didn't do the right thing, that is, you worked your ground, or if you didn't make it hefker, the food is still mutter. It doesn't make the food asur, but you're not allowed to do that. Okay, the next thing is, there's something called Kedusha Shvius. Somebody mentioned that. You're not using that word, but use Kedusha Shvius, which means the pasuk says, that during this Shemitah year, you should eat the produce. You can eat the things that grow on the ground, and we learn from there that you have to eat it in the best way possible. You can't waste it. You can't eat it in a way, let's say, before it's fully ripe. You have to eat it in the best way possible during Shemitah. You have to have a certain kedusha to it. You can't. So I know before I was married, I went to learn Eretz Yisrael, and it was a little after Shemitah, and the yeshiva had Shemitah wine. So after they made Kiddush, they had to make sure to drink up every drop of wine from the Kiddush cup. Okay? If there was a little bit left at the end, they didn't throw it in the sink because they couldn't waste it. It was Shemitah wine. Okay, it had Kedusha Shvius, you couldn't waste it. Yes.
The best way for you or the best for us to use when in our
That's a very good question. I believe that the din is you have to do it in the way for most people what would be considered best. Okay, doesn't depend on yes. I believe it depends on most people. It's a very good question. Yes.
Are you allowed to go into a not-food store and eat something that wasn't, that you know for a fact was not like that they put the stones with and they put it and they
So if they did the malachos, the food is not usher. The food is not usher. You can eat now. Wait, but there's one problem. There's one problem, and that is another rule of Kedusha Shvius is you're not allowed to buy and sell it like you buy and sell regular things. So the thing is like this. Really, it's hefker. Okay? Really, that apple is really hefker. Right? You know that's hefker. The tire says it. But the store owner doesn't think it's hefker. The store owner is going to chase you out with a baseball bat if you try to take his apple. Right? So if he says, okay, give me $1 and I'll give you the apple, well, you can't do that because you can't buy and sell it. Okay, so you're sort of stuck. If you want to risk your life and try to take his apple, you can try that. But it's mutter. The apple didn't become mutter, but he's going to beat you up if you try to do it. I wouldn't try that. Okay. Now there's an interesting thing. If you would have given him money, let's say you say, okay, I really want the apple. I'll give you the $1. Guess what? That $1 now has Kedusha Shvius also. Okay, not just the apple. The $1 also gets Kedusha Shvius. Okay, so then you're really messing him up if you do that. Yeah, okay. And another part of Kedusha Shvius is you're not allowed to take it out of Eretz Yisrael. Things that grew during Shemittah can't be taken out of Eretz Yisrael. So we're not supposed to get produce that has Kedusha Shvius here in America because they're not allowed to sell it. No, unfortunately, people do, but you're not allowed to. Yes. Oh, very good question. Very good. We're going to talk about that in a minute. There are parts of what's called Israel, what's called the state of Israel, that are not considered Eretz Yisrael. Okay, they're not in the borders of Eretz Yisrael. And in those places, it's completely not Shemittah. It's as if it was growing right here in Chicago. Okay? Just because it's in the state of Israel, doesn't mean it's in the borders of Eretz Yisrael. It really depends on the borders of Eretz Yisrael during the second Beis Hamikdash. It has to do with that. So the fact that it's officially in the government borders nowadays doesn't necessarily mean it's part of what's Eretz Yisrael for Shemitah rules. Okay, unfortunately, there are no Yidden left in Gaza, in Gaza, but there are Yidden in the south of Eretz Yisrael that are out of the border. Okay, way down in the south of Eretz Yisrael, that's not considered Eretz Yisrael. Yes. That was from Eretz Yisrael? You're talking about Shemitah fruit? Oh, Shemitah fruit from Eretz Yisrael. No. Once it came out, you're allowed to eat it. You're allowed to eat it. They weren't allowed to take it out of Eretz Yisrael. But once they did, you could eat it, but you have to eat it Kedusha Shvius. That means you can't waste it or use it, and then let's say you want to have apples, and most people eat apples raw, then you can't cook it. Okay, you have to eat it in the best way possible. Okay. Okay. Now we keep talking about Shemitah for apples and bananas and vegetables. I don't know bananas growing so, but fruits and vegetables and spices. Okay. What do you think about Shemitah on pieces of wood? Do you think there's Kedusha Shvius to pieces of wood? Any thoughts? Yes.
Same way like you have one person together to do out
so you think it doesn't have Kedusha Shvius because it's not a food?
Well, it's like it's not good.
And therefore what? And it's not good in one. It has no special rules to it. Okay, so if it's a piece of wood, you're right. If it's a piece of wood that's just a plain old piece of wood, a branch from a tree, no Kedusha Shvius to it. If it's a spice, like cinnamon, you boys know that, right? Cinnamon is it's like the bark of a special tree. So if it's a thing that's meant for a spicing, then it does have Kedusha Shvius. Okay, what about if it's a flower that happens to smell good? Okay, so it's really a piece of wood. I mean, a flower is really just a branch from a tree, but it happens to smell good. What do you think about that? Okay, go ahead. Why was that going before Shemitah? Well, each thing, depending on what it is.
It's a big tree, then
So the rules of each thing of how you decide if it's a Shemitah produce depends on what it is. Fruits have one rule and vegetables have a different rule. There's different rules.
If you see that a big tree has Kedusha Shvius, But I'm sure it was pretty cool.
Right, so different parts of it have Kedusha at different times. So it could be, may depend on when you harvest it, or may depend on when it grew. It depends on what different parts of it. But we could figure out which part has the Kedusha Shvius. But well, it happens to be, it's a machlokes whether flowers that smell good have Kedusha Shvius in them. And that may sound like something that's not so relevant, but it happens to be that Eretz Yisrael sells a lot of flowers to other countries. Okay, so flowers that we buy here in Chicago may actually come from Eretz Yisrael. So there's a machlokes where the flowers, they're very big exporters of flowers. There's a machlokes where the flowers that have a fragrance to them have Kedusha Shvius in them. Okay, that was our third thing. We better move along because we're going to run into minutes soon. Okay. Next thing, the fourth thing is, there's a thing called biur. Okay, at the end, when it says in the pasuk of Asher Ba'atzecha, you can only keep it for yourself while it's still available for the animals. Someone mentioned this. Once it's no more left for the animals, you can only keep a little bit, and you have to be mafkir the rest. Okay, that's called biur. It's a fourth din for Shemitah, and the fifth din for Shemitah is a din d'Rabbanan, that according to the Torah, things that grow during Shemitah you're allowed to eat. Midrabanan, anything that was planted or started to grow on Shemitah is usher. That means it's basically all vegetables. Fruits, the tree stays around from year to year, but vegetables, you have to replant them every single year. So if tomatoes started to grow in the middle of Shemitah, those tomatoes are usher. They're usher b'drabanan. Anybody want to guess why it's usher b'drabanan to eat that? Why shouldn't you eat that? Anybody here in front? What do you have to say? I haven't heard from you all day. Why does it come make it usher? What do they want from us? What's wrong? So the tomatoes are growing, so why can't I eat them? Why did you tell someone not to eat it? Can you think of a reason? Because what? It could be bad? Could be what? Not fully grown. Okay, but think of a Shemittah reason. Why would the Chacham tell me not to eat it? Do you have an idea? Okay. The reason is because since you have to plant it every year, the Chacham were afraid people would plant it and say, "Oh, it just grew by itself." Yeah, it happened to grow. Some tomatoes happened to grow right back up. And really, the guy planted them himself. You're not allowed to plant things on Shemitah. So Chacham said, to make sure people don't plant it, they said anything that started to grow on Shemitah, you're not allowed to eat. Well, then obviously, no one's going to plant it if he can't eat it anyhow. Okay, that's called Shemitah. Okay, I got to run along. I can't take questions right now. Okay, now we have only a few minutes. Okay. So now we move to something else. What do people do in Eretz Yisrael? Okay, they're not allowed to work on the ground, they're not allowed to take ownership of it, and they have to do shit. So what do? How do they eat? Okay, there's 5 ways that people eat in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, another 5. 5 ways that people eat in Eretz Yisrael. Okay? I'm going to tell them to you because we have enough time for everyone to say themselves. Okay, the first is, unfortunately, lots of people in Eretz Yisrael are not Shemittah mitzvahs, and they don't do what they're supposed to. And they treat them like everything else. They don't do anything. They pretend, to them, the fact that Shemitah means nothing. They plow their fields, and they harvest their fields, and they take ownership of it, and they do everything they want to. Unfortunately, there are people like that who are not Shemitah mitzvahs, and they do like that. The second is, when Yidden first started coming to Eretz Yisrael in the late 1800s, there were always a few Yidden, but more significant amount of Yidden started coming there. There were Yidden there literally who starved to death from having nothing to eat. Okay? It's like, when we say we're starving, we just mean, oh my gosh, I haven't had a snack in an hour. You know what I mean? But these people were really, really starving. Okay? People starved to death. Okay? People had nothing to eat and they just died because they had nothing to eat. It was very serious. And at that time, for one Shemittah, the big Gedolei Yisrael told them they could do a mechira. They could sell the land of Eretz Yisrael, and it would belong to the Arabs, and then they could use those lands on Shemittah, and they could live off the produce of that field. Okay? That's what came to be known, the Heter Mechira. They gave them a Heter to do this is in the late 1800s. Well, after they did it once, it became a big machlokes whether you're allowed to continue doing that. It was one time people were really desperate. The question is if they could still keep on doing that. Okay? Excuse me? Yes, Rabban? If them said they did answer. And some of them who said you could do it said, yeah, you could do it again. And some said you can't do it again. Some said I didn't mean it, and we did say that we shouldn't say it. And then also, what was going on in the 1800s is not what's going on now. Right? Things are not nearly as desperate and as difficult now as they were then. So it's a big question. Some Rabbanim still continue to do that, and there are many farmers who work their fields and do everything they want to because of a Heter Mechira. Most of the hashkachas that you would eat from would not allow product like that. Okay, something that was made like that, they would not consider to be kosher. But there are people who do. There are people in Eretz Yisrael who do that, and even get people here who rely on those things. Okay, the third thing is very similar to the second one, but very different also. They can't use their farms. They go to Arab farmers. Okay, they go to farms that are run by Arabs, and they say to them, I want to buy your tomatoes, I want to buy the things that you grew to use in my land Eretz Yisrael. So the people eat off of things from Arabs, but you know what they have to do. There's a little bit of a problem over here. That's a good question about Trumas and Maishas, but what they have to do is, they have to make sure that the Arab really grew it. Because what happens is, since so many people want produce that doesn't have a Shemitah problem, Yidden, who work their fields, sell their tomatoes to Arabs, and then the Arabs turn around to the Yidden and say, oh, look, I have tomatoes to sell. And they're really just selling the Yidden's tomatoes from down the block. Okay, so someone's got to make sure that the Arab who's selling you the tomatoes really grew those tomatoes and didn't just buy them from another Yid who didn't keep Shemitah the way he was supposed to. Okay, so that's the third way. The fourth way is something called Oitzer Bezdin. Okay, we don't really have time to explain what that is. Oitzer Bezdin means, in short, I'm going to say this really short, Oitzer Bezdin means is, during Shemitah, your fields are hefker. So let's say I have a farm that's an hour away from Yerushalayim. Okay? It's in the middle of no place. I have a farm, and it's filled with this 10,000 oranges growing on my farm. Okay? It's hefker. Anybody can take it. And I leave it. There's completely hefker. Whoever wants to take it. How many people are going to come out there to get oranges? 2 people? Well, some guy's going to be driving by the road. He'll see the oranges to go take one. But basically, all those oranges are going to rot. So what Bezdin does is, Bezdin appoints people to go collect the oranges and bring them to the cities. Bring them to where people live. Bezdin takes the orange. Now, you're not allowed to harvest for yourself the whole field. But they're doing it as for Bezdin for everybody else. They take the oranges and they bring them to town, and then they say to people, come take oranges. Oranges are hefker. Okay, we just brought them to you from there to here. Now, what they're allowed to do is they're allowed to charge you for their work. So if they trucked it from that city, from the farm to here, they could charge you a little bit for how much they carried it here, and then they put it into a box for you and things like that. They can't charge you for the oranges. The oranges are hefker, but they're doing you a favor and bringing it to town. So there are a lot of people who eat produce. It's called Oitzer Bezdin. Bezdin takes care of it for you and brings it from the fields to the cities. And the last is, someone had mentioned this, they use produce that's not from Shemitah. So one way to do it is, as someone had mentioned, they get produce from parts of Israel that are not Eretz Yisrael. And there are parts of the land of Israel that are in the government official borders that are not Eretz Yisrael. They're out of the borders of what the Torah calls Eretz Yisrael. So those parts don't have no rules of Shemitah. Or they get produce from other countries. They buy grain from Italy. Okay, well in Italy there's no Shemitah, so they can buy grain from there. Or they can save stuff from the year before. Okay, so companies now will be stock up on the things that they need. And let's say one of the big things that Eretz Yisrael makes is spices, parsley, and herbs and things like that. So companies will buy extra amounts of it this year, put it away, and that way next year when they're going to need it, it'll be Shemitah. They'll use from this year's. Okay, they'll just pack it away and keep it for the next year. Okay, so those are the 5 things. We did them really quickly. The 5 ways that people eat during Shemitah, basically how they eat during Shemitah. And as someone mentioned, I wanted to just finish with that at the end of Shemitah, there's 2 halachas that come up at the end of Shemitah. One of them is fruits of Shemitah are harvested at the end of the year of Shemitah. So when you're going to want to buy an esrog, not this sukkah, but the sukkahs afterwards, if you buy an esrog from Eretz Yisrael, that'll be an esrog that was a Shemitah esrog. It has the din of Shemitah, but it doesn't come to you until after Shemitah. That's one thing. And the second thing is, another person I mentioned about Shemitah's Ksafim, that money that someone owes you, when it comes the end of Shemitah, Rosh Hashanah, the end of Shemitah, he doesn't owe you the money anymore. Okay? It's not here in Parshas Bahar, so you're off the hook. You don't have to know that. What do you say? Okay, well, if I come back to your class before the end of Shemitah, I'll tell you, everybody else, how they should still be able to collect $1 million. Right? But that is true. Very good. We'll talk about that. If we get to there, somebody must learn the science about that. Okay, thank you, boys.